I've got a lot of things to do. I've got to comb my hair and I've got to change my clothes and I'm going to have to clean up all of this mess. And I really need to spend a few moments pulling together all of the supplies that we're going to need, all the things that we're going to need for the Seder meal and for communion. Let's just be creative with what we have. It doesn't need to be perfect, because what we're really doing here is we're remembering this moment in the life of Israel, like the Exodus moment, where God leads the people from slavery into freedom, from like bondage into liberation, or from despair into hope. That's what's important. As we also remember, for Christians, the movement of Holy Week, from death to new life. See, it all comes together. So here are a few of the things that we're going to need. I'm going to mispronounce these words. No disrespect for our Jewish brothers and sisters, but karpas. I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced. That's normally a parsley or a vegetable to represent spring. I don't have parsley. I don't know how many vegetables I've got, but I do know this. I've got shredded lettuce. That's what I'm going to use. Use whatever you come up with. Then we need some sort of bitter herb, a horseradish, anything that kind of reminds us of the bitterness of slavery. You know what I'm going to use? I'm going to use a seasoning packet with all kinds of herbs and spices, that sort of thing. Then we're going to need haroset, which is a kind of a mixture of apple, wine, and nuts. But this is to remind us of the hard work that the Israelites had to do in Egypt. I don't have those things, but I do have applesauce, and that's what I'm going to use. Then next we need a shank bone to remind us of the Passover meal the Israelites ate before they left Egypt. So you know what I did? Well, I didn't do it. Someone in my family just drew one. And I'm sure that's going to be just fine for what it is we're trying to do. And then finally, a roasted or a hard-boiled egg. Anything will work for this, of course. Anything that kind of represents new beginnings in the circle of life. We're going to need some sort of unleavened bread. They mean it's bread that hasn't had yeast added to it. Now, if that's all you have, just use regular bread. You know what I'm going to use. Tortillas. Love them anyway. I'm going to use that not only in the Seder meal for the matzah, I'm going to use that for the communion bread. And then finally, wine. Say you don't have wine at your house, or you don't even want wine at your house, use grape juice. And if you don't have grape juice, anything will do that's fun. You could use apple juice if that's what your family would prefer, or you know what, you can even use water. So I'm going to go gather my supplies. If you're watching this before we're actually doing the Seder meal, go out and pull together your supplies. Or if it's Thursday night and you're watching this right now, just push pause, go gather everything you need. So I think we're ready. I've got the Seder plate. It might not be perfect, but it's as good as it needs to be. We got everything together also ready for our Holy Communion that we'll celebrate after our Seder meal. And then when it's all said and done, I would invite you to simply consume all the things you have as a celebration of this night. And most importantly, right over here, but we have the most important part, and that is the words of the story, or what's called the Seder Haggadah. And so I'll be reading from this, as all Jewish people, when they have the Seder meal, read from some sort of script. It's like a liturgy, in a way of keeping us all on the same page. Welcome to all who have joined us this evening for our Seder. We are so grateful that we can be together, if only to see each other for these few moments. How different is this night from all other nights? We have been asking this question ever since the Seder was created, so that we could ask many other questions. And if only the questions, it would have been enough. Passover means something different to every generation of Jewish people and Christians. And this particular virus that our world is dealing with has separated us and has also brought us together in many unexpected ways. So the teachers gave us rituals to help us tell the story of our passages from slavery into freedom, from fear into hope. And if only the rituals, it would have been enough. So now we lift up our cup of wine and say, "Blessed are you, God, sovereign of all, creator of the fruit of the vine. Blessed are you, God, who has kept us alive, sustained us and brought us together on this very different and sacred night of Passover. And may we be together again at the same time next year. The Seder was created so that families could fulfill the biblical commandment of teaching the Exodus story to our children and our grandchildren. And it has many ways to keep people engaged. Not least of these is our Seder plate. Our Seder plate has 6 items, and in each and every one of these items, we are invited ourselves to think of ourselves as if we have actually been present at the Exodus from Egypt. So, our Seder plate. First, we have our karpas, although I'm probably not pronouncing that right. What this is, a parsley or any sort of vegetable that represents spring. We also have maror, horseradish, or chazaret, some sort of lettuce, something like that. A bitter herb, oftentimes, is what people call it. I have horseradish, or just a bunch of spices. And this reminds us of the bitterness of slavery. Next, we have our haroset, normally an apple, wine, and nut mixture. This reminds us of the hard work that the Israelites did in Egypt. We have a shank bone to remind us of the Passover meal the Israelites ate before they left Egypt. And finally, a hard-boiled egg that represents new beginnings. And if only the Seder plate, it would have been enough. Tonight, we tell the story of how God brought us from slavery to freedom and how we became God's people. And if only the story, it would have been enough. A long, long time ago, the Pharaoh became afraid of the Israelites in his land. He does not understand their different ways, and he makes them slaves and orders them to drown their baby boys so that they cannot become too powerful. But Pharaoh's daughter does not agree. She rescues a baby with the help of the baby's sister and mother, and she names him Moses and raises him in Pharaoh's court. When Moses grows up, he flees into the desert. He becomes a shepherd and marries a non-Israelite woman. One day, while Moses tends his flock, God appears to him and tells Moses to return to Egypt to free his people from slavery. Moses is afraid he will fail. He knows how hard it will be to convince Pharaoh. Tyrants always believe that they are more powerful than anything or anyone else. So Pharaoh has to learn that he is not fighting Moses, but God, and a people whose belief in God is greater than their fear of Pharaoh. So God commands Moses to go to Egypt to save the Israelites, and he sends along with him Moses' brother, Aaron, and his sister, Miriam. The Israelites have now been slaves for more than 4 centuries, and they will learn about God, as do the Egyptians, through the 10 plagues. We recite them together. Blood, frogs, lice, flies, cattle plague, boils, hail, locust, darkness, and finally, the angel of death. Our Seder recalls the long night of waiting during the 10th plague. Pharaoh finally agrees to let my people go, and the Israelites leave quickly, carrying what they can. They take the bread that the slaves eat, one that has no time to rise, the matzah, and then they head towards the Sea of Reeds. But as tyrants often do, Pharaoh changes his mind and comes after them with his army in their chariots. The people are terrified. Even Moses is frightened. But we are taught that one man steps into the sea and others follow. And God parts the waters for the Israelites to cross safely to the other side. And when Pharaoh and his armies follow, the seas close over them and they drown. Miriam and the other women lead the Israelites in a new song. And if only a new song, it would have been enough. Our journey from Egypt is the moment of our birth as a people. Many people that we teach this central story of the Jewish people year after year so that we will remember and better understand what it is like to be oppressed and to hope for freedom. And if only hope, it would have been enough. Because the people of God were once slaves, we must oppose slavery. Because we know what it is like to not have a voice, we must speak out for the voiceless. And if only we have a voice, it would have been enough. This moment is our narrow place. And may we emerge from our bondage to a new understanding of the work we must do to make the world a better place for all. And if only a better place for all, it would be enough. How is this night different from all other nights? Tonight is a totally different celebration. And we thank each person for their unique contribution to our virtual table. Our people cried out to God, and God answered them. On this hopeful note, we conclude our Seder, from slavery into freedom, from bondage into liberation, and from hopelessness and despair into new life. After he would have finished this meal with his disciples, Jesus then took bread and he broke it and he gave it to his disciples. You've heard this so many times before. This is what Jesus does. On the very last night, he is able to have a supper with his disciples. This last supper, this last Seder meal for him, in this moment, he teaches us what it means to be a people of God. He gives us a commandment as he washes the feet of the disciples, and he says, care for one another, serve one another, and love one another, as I have loved you. Essentially saying, you do for the world what I am going to do for you. And then after supper, he takes bread, and he breaks it, and he gives it to his disciples, and he says, take and eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me. Again, after supper, he takes the cup and he gives thanks and he gives it for all to drink and says, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, and it is shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Do this for the remembrance of me. Lord, remember us in your kingdom and teach us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. As we conclude this virtual service, I would invite you to now celebrate with whatever it is that you have set before yourself on this Seder plate, and with whatever it is that you prepared for the communion meal. Join now with the whole world in celebration of the promise that God makes, of always leading us from slavery into freedom, out of bondage into liberation, always leading us from despair to hope.